the optimization stuff that I've marked to make sure that the flow is correct. And then I want to go over the tapes, listen to me, like, this is Donald Trump Jr., to listen to the YouTube videos you did to make sure we didn't have any questions.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
And I'm sure that like there's some stuff in the Gliffy that I know that we didn't have, which was how do you optimize with Facebook and Twitter, which I'm sure are really easy. We just need you to like walk us through the process on the screen.
Okay.
To make sure we're not missing anything. That was the only one that I was like, that one, and then any discussion you have about cross affinity.
Okay.
Because that's also was like one you don't do yet. Let me just, okay.
Yeah, well, we did it. Well, we've done it once, so I don't think I've really walked you through the process, though. So
yes, exactly.
So
I'm just going to make sure we've captured all the processes, and then I know that for me, I had questions on just the Twitter and Facebook optimization, and then I think you captured for us the relative CTR one, and then the one that's not here yet is cross affinity targeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me go through it based off our conversation. Amazing. Why is this happening? Yeah. Okay, can everybody see my V7 on my screen, or should I make it larger?
Little larger, please. That's great.
Perfect. Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm capturing obviously what's going on, and then it'll be easy for me to convert it to what it should be, right? So you receive it in Asana, you add the ad groups and the topics under each ad group. Do you discuss them as topics? I know topics is also a category of ad group, but so what do you call the groups under the ad groups?
That's a good question. You can, I mean, you could call them
keyword subjects. I mean,
yeah, call them topics. Topics is fine.
Okay.
Ad groups and topics. Yeah.
Perfect.
As long as everybody knows what we're talking about.
Good. So in this case, when you add the ad groups, you also have loaded in the blacklist and the whitelists, right? It's just a separate process running in the back.
No, the whitelist. Okay, so the blacklist actually applies on to the entire campaign.
Yep.
A whitelist is actually so the blacklist you can it will exclude these placements across any different ad group. The whitelist will only be included in those ad groups in which it's loaded, because it's actually it's set up in placements. Okay, set up on the placements tab.
So it's only the placements ad group.
Yeah, it is an ad group in and of itself. So if you set up a whitelist in ad group A, it doesn't extend out into any other ad group other than its own.
Yeah, I started to figure that out when I started watching your video. It was enormously helpful. I was like, oh, it doesn't, I need to remember placements is a separate thing. Okay, yeah. Super helpful. So you determine CPV estimate based on adults 3 to 5 cents, kid 2 to 3 cents. You know, execute, and then you add Facebook, Twitter, and then determine your bid there as well, or not. Yes.
We haven't done, by the way, we haven't done Twitter for I think over 2 years now. So I am way, like, I wouldn't even put Twitter on this for the time being. It's just Facebook.
No worries. That's amazing. Well, it's funny because the account managers talked about it like they did it, and I was like, well, if they do it, cool.
Well, we always include it, but no one buys it like that. So we're hoping that a product will incentivize, you know, clients, potential clients to really, you know, use the full package of platforms from us, because that's when we can be most effective. But
so
yeah, we haven't done Twitter for a very long time.
But you do want us to include Twitter when we talk about an interface, right?
Yes, yes,
okay.
for sure.
So let me make sure I add that down here. Okay, I can do that later. Okay, so pacing, I think we talked about and we were fine.
Go back to, I'm sorry. Can you go back to that where you were? I just want to take a look at that. Okay, so load in blacklist for campaign based on ever-evolving blacklist with banned words. Load in whitelist for ad groups, which was loaded on whitelist created from place. Okay, okay, that's fine.
Cool, awesome. You do Facebook and determine the CPV separately. Pacing, I think I haven't made any changes, but you review at noon and end of day. We want to to whatever 10:30, etc.
One change, I would say, I would use like the cutoff would be closer to 33% at noon.
Is that how you do it? Is that how you do it now, or how you want to do it?
That's how I do it. I look at, I usually, if it's 33%, and maybe even lower than that, but 33% for sure. If it's paced that much by noon, it's almost certainly going to finish out by the end of the day, just because a lot of advertisers will expend their budget by early evening, and the bidding, it'll just be easier to get the placements in the early evening. So it's more like 33%. Yeah.
So if it's more than 33%, you'll change it. If it's 33%, you're okay.
Yeah, if it's running faster, if it's running hotter than 33%, then I'll usually, well, it depends. I mean, every campaign is kind of different. So when we automate these with rules, we'll have to actually pick numbers. But right now, it's sort of like a range. If it's as low as 33% and as high as like 50, it's really in that window. I won't make any changes. If it's above that window, even if it's above, I mean, if it's above 33, sometimes I'll even make changes. But if it's below 33, then I could be worried, but it depends on what day of the campaign it is. If it's the first day and it's running under 33%, or even the second day, then I may just leave the bids. I may not increase them. But if we get to like the third day and the fourth day, then I'll have to do something. So I can, when we write all these rules out, I'll have to just choose some cutoffs and some thresholds. But it's still kind of an art, just because it's a process. I hope that makes sense.
Yes. So I'm just writing the basics of the rules. It's not likely that we'll implement this in the MVP, right? Yeah. But even if we just by mapping it, we can be like, okay, these are just the rules to start with. We know what data to collect. So.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if it's under 33%, you'll just leave it. You'll be like, it's cool. We're just going to see what's happened, right?
If it's the first or second day of the campaign. If it's the third day of the campaign, it should be running at least 33% by noon. So it depends on where we are in the campaign.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So now we have, so I changed the format of this from before because I wanted to, so think of, the vertical stuff underneath, like the steps in order to do the top line, right? So think of the top line as different ways in which we've described optimization, right? So you optimize based on just low performance of the ad groups, right? Which is what you've described here. Well, this is just pacing, right? But this might just be low performance. I guess it's exactly the same if I'm thinking about it. What you define as low performance is low fulfillment, right? Or low views.
Low metric results.
Yeah. Got it. All right. So I should leave it as is. So we have low performance. You optimize by adding new ad groups and topics, but under a ad group. Optimize by adding new ad groups that are from the account managers, Optimize based on GA affinities and categories. And then optimize on relative CTR. And eventually we're going to add cross affinity. But right now you do these 5, right?
Yeah, also, so the first thing, so the way the sequence works is I'll, so once I get to, so let's say it's day 3 and I get to the equilibrium, you know, CPV, and we're between, you know, 33 and 50% by noon on a certain day, or it's the end of the day and it's fully delivered against the budget, either the next morning or that afternoon, whenever I happen to be doing it. Basically, I'll start from the bottom and work my way up. So let's say there are 10 different or 5 different ad groups, right? And so I'll pick the one that's performing the worst and I'll reduce the bid and just continue to reduce bids and then see what happens the next day. If we're still delivering in full, then that's fine. I can do some more, I can remove some more underperforming stuff. If we have removed too much, then we won't be delivering any longer. So I may have to add, like, if you think of a range of like 10 to 1, with 10 being the best performing either ad group or topic and 1 being the worst, obviously you start with 1. Start with 1, then remove 2, then remove 3, check it. Have I removed too much inventory? No. Okay, great. I can remove a little more. And then finally you get to the point where, okay, no, I'm no longer spending my budget. So now I have to go back, maybe add 4 back in, right? And at the same time, we can also look for additional segments to include. And new whitelist placements will come in all the time because that's just the nature of the data warehouse. We'll have, there's new content on YouTube, new metadata hits, so new stuff will get added to the whitelist. So that will expand our inventory as well. But the vast majority of what the work, like the vast majority of the optimization work, is actually exclusion, not inclusion.
Okay, so if I can just repeat it back, so I can make sure I captured it, right? So, and questions around it. When you use an example of 1 to 10, do you usually aim to have 10 different ad groups? Or were you just using that for demonstrative purposes?
No, whatever it happens to be. If
okay.
It's 5 ad groups.
5, 3, whatever. Okay. So,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Did you want to ask me, Dave?
But we're not just looking at ad groups. We're also looking at topics under the ad groups. Remember?
Sure. So, exactly.
We're doing both. So we're like ranking the ad groups, and the way you rank the metrics to rank ad groups are slightly different than the metrics to rank the individual topics. But the principle is the same. Everything is getting a score essentially, and you're working from the worst up to eliminate.
And the score right now is just the performance metric, right? That's it.
Yeah. So it's just a function of, so at the ad group level, it's a function of like view rate, CTR, and earned action rate. And at the individual topic level, it's view rate and CTR, because you can't get earned actions. They don't report on earned actions, you know, within an ad group. They only report that metric at the ad group level.
Right. Sorry, I don't know what just happened there. That's not helpful. Sorry, I don't know what I just did to the... All right, that was retarded. Sorry, guys. Okay, so what you're considering low performance is CTR and earned action. And then for the topics, it's just CTR.
And view rate as well. No, for it's view rate, CTR, earned actions, and then view rate, CTR for topic.
Amazing. So, how do you evaluate then that and you just start, reducing the bid on certain groups or topics. How do you determine when you have too little inventory?
Well, you'll determine that the next day. So let's say, I make a handful of optimizations today, some bid decreases, and then also some, pausing some underperforming topics under the ad groups, right? So starting at the weakest performers. And then tomorrow, I review the campaign again. I review it, let's say at noon, and I see, have I removed too much by reducing the bids and by pausing some topic segments? Have I taken out too much potential inventory, and can we no longer deliver? So if I'm below 33% that next day, then it's like, okay, I'm going to have to add some stuff back in, because I know yesterday I delivered fine and I was running, it was running as it should be, but today we're running too cold, so I have to add more gas. I have to unpause some segments or potentially increase the bids back up on some ad groups.
So do you have to remember every action that you do from day to day, or do you record that somewhere, or do you just look at ad groups history and you're like, AdWords history, and you're like, oh, okay, yesterday I decreased the bid, or 3 days ago I decreased the bid?
Right. Okay, I do. I remember. I usually just remember. Like, I'll know by looking at the ad groups. I try to start all ad groups at the same bid, so I'll know if there's one ad group that's a penny lower. Like, oh yeah, that's the last one that I optimized down. And then in terms of looking at the segments, it's the same thing. If I see some that are paused, I'll say, like, oh yeah, those are the ones that I just paused. When you get into like the second and third iteration of the optimizations, then obviously it's like, oh, which one did I pause last? I'd have to go back and AdWords and look at changes, the change history. So to be able to record all these things, so you have a point in time where, let's say it's yesterday, 3 days of the campaign have gone by. You have run up to this point with like just the full initial targeting, and you've done some bid adjustments. So you take like a snapshot of where you were yesterday, and then you compare that to today, where the new snapshot is certain things are paused, and you're looking at the delivery. And if you're still pacing okay, then the changes you made are fine. You might even want to optimize some more. You might even want to take out something that you had ranked a 5 or a 6, and take another look the next day. Is it still running between 30 and 50?
You keep a lot of stuff in your head. Wow.
Yeah. So all of this, if it could be recorded somehow, and ultimately this has to be a automatic process where it's smart enough to know that everything gets a score, everything is sort of like looked at on a daily basis, and things are either turned on or turned off based on how the campaign is performing, today relative to yesterday before the optimizations were made. And that process keeps repeating. The pacing obviously keeps repeating every day, and the optimization process probably repeats every week or so, because you have to wait till you have sufficient observations to re-optimize.
Right.
But
so can I ask a question then to your second comment, which was about, this is a campaign, to your second comment about how you get to a certain point where you're like, oh no, I've taken out too much, right? Like, and in other words, I've brought it all down.
Yeah.
What are you most likely to use to add back? Do you usually add new ad groups, or are you trying to, because you'll notice for the ad groups from the GA affinities and CTRs, I understand that those get added to the blacklist and whitelist, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes. Now, I was talking about the general case before we even get to GA affinities and categories, because most clients up until today didn't allow us to have that. So what generally, like, putting that aside for the moment, and I'll talk about that as well, but assuming that doesn't exist, I'm more likely to just unpause what I paused. So if I'm running at like 10% midday today where I was like 40% midday yesterday. I'm like, okay, I'm going to unpause what I paused. Now, if we've got input from GA, then that's even better. Then I can potentially add some new stuff in there, right? Add some new affinities and market interests, and I can exclude the same based on what I'm seeing in GA, but what I'm seeing with the site interaction in GA. But the principle would be the same, right? It's like, oh, okay, I saw something really interesting in GA where this certain affinity is just having a horrible site engagement. Let's turn it off. So today I turn it off. Tomorrow, after I added that to the affinity blacklist, what happened? Am I still delivering fine? Okay, great. Am I delivering too low now? It's like, oh, I might have throttled things back too much by turning that off. But let's say my performance increased. So now I have to say, well, the performance increased when I blacklisted that affinity. But so I don't know if I necessarily want to turn it back on. I may just want to turn on something else. I may want to unpause a segment or maybe raise a bid on an ad group by a penny. It depends. If you make changes and they ramp up the performance from one day to the next, you don't want to undo those, even if it restricts your inventory. It's better to try to open up things elsewhere, right? That's when the optimization really works well. So there are a lot of factors involved in this, but I'm confident that we can get them all mapped out, and ultimately all this can become an automated process for sure.
Yeah. So just let me reflect it back, and maybe Dave, you have a perspective on it. So you don't even always optimize by decreasing a bid on a group. You might just pause a group, but don't you lower the bid once first, and then you'll be like, you know what, I'm just going to pause it? Or do you pause it right away? In other words, is there an order by which you decide to decrease and or pause?
Yes, lower the bid first, and then if it's like all the other ad groups are 2 cents and this one's now 1 cent and it's still performing relatively bad, I would then go into that ad group, make sure there's no other changes I can make within the ad group. Is there anything like I can pull out? So maybe the ad group is comprised of 3 affinities, and let's say one is doing well. Okay, so I can turn off the other 2 within that ad group. Or all 3 affinities are doing poorly. I can dig even deeper. I can say, okay, well, let's now slice them by age, or by parental status, or by gender. Is there any redeeming quality at all in that ad group? I really don't like to turn something off entirely. So I really try to just slice further down until I can find some good combination of things that would allow me to keep the ad group on. But generally, when you remove an ad, when you put an ad group a penny lower than the others, it tends to deliver less anyway. So you don't usually have to turn it off entirely, but I almost never turn off an ad group entirely. I can almost always find something redeeming, some combination of things within it that's redeeming enough that we can keep it on.
Got it. So you basically only pull it if it's the last thing to do.
Yes, it's the last resort.
Okay, so how often do you get to the point of adding new ad groups? Or so I understand GA affinities and categories. Like, I guess I should ask first, which one of these? How often do you actually add things?
If the client gives us access to GA, it wouldn't be adding a new ad group for the most part. We don't normally add ad groups. What we'll do is we'll add to the topics within the ad group. So let's say the client gives us access to GA and we find that oh, there's these affinities that we weren't even targeting these affinities, but the users that we're serving their ad to, they have this food lover affinity. We didn't even think of that. And if they're a food lover, they're, you know, really interacting well with the site. We need to add this affinity. So we would just add that to the affinity ad group.
Right. And so, and how often do you, so if they give you the GA account, great. I guess what I'm asking is, do you add to ad group, do you add topics to ad group often enough, or do you usually have to get permission from the client in order to, like, meaning, hey, we're adding these topics, are they approved?
I think it's probably about 50-50. 50% of the time it's up to our discretion, and then the other half we need to get approval, just, you know, from the client, which is usually just informing them what we want to do, and they almost always would then sign off on it. So I'd say it's about 50-50.
Okay. And so how often are you adding topics in general after you've performed all these decreases?
Okay, so outside of, you know, the whitelist that gets updated, we won't, just putting that aside, because that's just a normal process of, as new stuff gets added, it's the same metadata, it's just new placements. There would be one, after 3 days, there should be at least one or a handful of changes we should be making if we have access to GA. Should be adding stuff for sure, probably blacklisting some stuff as well. But if we don't have access to GA, we normally don't add more stuff unless, I mean, we'll eventually be we're going in that direction as our analysis of metadata and cross affinities gets smarter, but we're not there where we're doing a lot of adding unless we find that everything's performing poorly or there's not enough inventory, you know, we have to go back to the drawing board. It doesn't happen often though. I don't remember the last time that it happened.
Right, you've added it. Okay. Well, I mean, part of this might be solved because you're constantly adding new inventory, right? Like that's one of the things David and I chatted about yesterday based on your call, just an estimate on what it would take to add stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And you're in theory going to be able to get a bigger volume. So I'm just wondering if you're not even going to, like, when do you use relative keyword or use the AMs? Or
the relative, yeah, that we can. I mean, the thing is, I would like to use the relative CTR by metadata on every single campaign. Probably after 1 week in, and then maybe look at it again after a couple weeks. That's really important. So having a robust data warehouse, so once we find, you know, what the relatively good, relatively bad metadata is, that we can get a lot of new fresh placements with that metadata is really important. So yeah, so you know, what I talked about with Dave, that extra step of loading the data warehouse with, you know, what we described was everything that's like uploaded in the last 7 days that has 10,000 views or higher, and just getting that I really look at that independent of any individual campaign, but rather that's something that's going to pay dividends for all of our campaigns, because we'll expand our blacklist. It, you know, probably we'll expand our whitelist as well. It'll keep our data warehouse fresh and growing. So that's really important that we have that automated process going.
Yeah, I guess that's my point. Is you were talking about how your whitelists were updating anyway, and your process. Doing the process is really like when you have been like, oh, I have like a nanosecond, I'm going to go add inventory.
Yeah.
Or is there another way in which new inventory is being added that isn't you adding the new inventory, right?
No, it's so
what's being added to the whitelist that is new inventory. Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah, it's a manual, so it's a manual process to get
Right.
a specific.
But it's you adding the inventory manually.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yes. Okay, great.
Yep.
So I'm going to move the GA column over to here because you anticipate using it more often.
Yeah.
And then you want to use the relative CTR and keywords. What about the remarketing terms or the account management? Do you anticipate using it more than you use it now?
Yes, I would like also to use that more because it's valuable to know, even if, you know, remarketing, they're not managed placements, they're just whatever placements, you know, the limited data we can get from non-managed placements. It's still helpful to get a count of the number of views of all of the metadata associated with remarketing, because we may discover where our audience is that we just never thought about because it wasn't intuitive.
Right.
So like the same example, like, oh, we're getting a lot of like food. There's metadata food or dinners or cooking. Like, for some reason, our audience is getting a lot of metadata hits on this. We didn't even think about this. So let's test it. So then we can put it in the campaign and see, put those in either as affinities or managed placements or whatever, and then we can test how it performs for our campaign.
Okay. So then when you use these, right, in the case of GA and CTR, it ends up adding to, like, the low performing ones get added to the blacklist and the high performing ones get added to.
No, not quite. The high performing ones, yes, we would search, make sure that we're picking up all the metadata for the high performing terms. But the low performing terms, they wouldn't necessarily be blacklisted. They would rather just not be part of the whitelist. So we wouldn't, like, for example, in our whitelisted placements, using the example of like Minecraft from this campaign, we would not blacklist everything, you know, search our data warehouse and create a brand new blacklist and blacklist every single placement that had Minecraft in it. Rather, we would just not include Minecraft, that term. If that term appeared, it would not go in a whitelist placement.
And Minecraft is a remarketing term, or what? Minecraft is is a category?
Relative CTR. That's a relative CTR term.
Ah, got it.
Yeah.
So you basically remove from whitelist.
Yeah, remove anything with, if we see that a piece of metadata is really, really bad, then even if it has other hits on metadata, like say like surprise toy Minecraft. Oh, so we're pulling metadata and creating whitelist for surprise toy. But if it's surprise toy Minecraft, then we don't want it. Then it's not going in the managed list. So with remarketing, we can't get a relative CTR on remarketing metadata. All we can do is measure the number of views that different metadata contributed to, because we're not getting accurate view rates and we're not getting CTR at all on an individual placement basis unless it's a managed placement. And remarketing is not managed placements. Remarketing is just wherever that video viewer happens to be after they view your ad. Unless you restrict it, your ad could potentially serve to them again somewhere else. And that's not a managed placement. So we can't get the rich data on that. But what we can obviously get is the number of times that, you know, this, you know, whatever, some certain piece of metadata is appearing, because we get all this, the placements, and we get all the views. So you can use it to add to potentially the campaign. You would not really currently use it to reduce or restrict the campaign. Does that make sense?
Yes, for CTR, but so for CTR of keywords, that makes sense. Metadata, right?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about GA though, can you add to whitelist and put on blacklist if someone has a low affinities or categories based on GA data? Or do you do the same thing? You just add it to the whitelist if it's the top 5, and what do you do with, say,
Okay,
bottom
remember,
5?
the GA data is a little different. The GA data is like cookie data. So it's user affinities and user in market, whether a user's in market for something. Right. So the GA affinities and in market interests track one-to-one, a one-to-one basis to the AdWords affinities and in market. So they're exactly the same. So we don't need to do anything really with metadata. If we find a very, very strong affinity for something, we could just add that affinity, add the same affinity in AdWords, or blacklist a certain affinity. We could also, depending on the nature of the affinity, we could search for placements that had that metadata. So that's certainly a possibility as well. And we can expand the whitelist with that metadata. But the quickest and easiest thing to do, since there's that one-to-one relationship, is to just either add or turn off or blacklist an affinity based on what we're seeing in Google Analytics.
Right.
Certainly you could use it in metadata as well, but you don't have to just use it in metadata.
I guess when you talk about using it in metadata, I think what I'm trying to be explicit about is if X, then you do Y. So for example, I understand with metadata analysis, like the way that the mechanism by which it gets accounted for is in the whitelists, right? So for GA, when you see that there's an affinity to, snowboarders, do you add snowboarders under the affinities tab in AdWords? And that's the way, because it's like one of the top 5, or do you filter your blacklists for placements that say snowboarding? I guess is my question. What do you actually do? Or what actually happens?
Both. So what actually happens now is just the first thing, because it's so time consuming to query the data warehouse and it's not complete. So unless if it's a granular term, we may not get many hits, and that may not be an issue with data warehouse. It may just be an issue with the way that YouTube, the vast majority of content is like in certain categories, and if it's too niche, it won't even, we can try, but there won't be many hits at all. So ideally, we want to do both. The first one is very easy and can be done quickly. The second one won't necessarily apply for all pieces of metadata, and it is right now with our manual process very time consuming.
Got it. So what you would like to have happen when it is automated is it adds it as an affinity group if it's in the top 5. What do you do with the bottom 5? You said you wanted the ability to either remove them from an affinity list and or remove them from the whitelist?
Yes, you would definitely remove them. You would definitely remove them if you were serving on an affinity that was performing poorly on site engagement from Google Analytics. You definitely remove it if you were serving it, and depending on the degree of underperformance, you could probably blacklist it. So that means that on a campaign level, if a user has a certain affinity, no matter what the ad group is, it gets blacklisted. But you'd have to watch that very carefully. That's the sort of optimization you'd want to make just by itself, because you'd want to isolate the impact to just that change, because it would be a pretty big change. So, and given the fact that once you make that change, it would apply to every single impression served on the campaign. It wouldn't take long to accumulate enough impressions to determine whether it's a good move or not, right? So in one day, you would ideally, as a result of these new affinity blacklists, you should immediately see a performance increase, right? Because it applies to everything across the board. If it does nothing, or if a performance actually decreases and that's the only change you made, you might as well unblacklist it, because you're just restricting inventory. It wasn't effective. But the time that I did make that change was very effective.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let me just, okay, and what you want to do is add that, be able to add it to a blacklist per campaign if it's a low score in GA. Because adding it as a topic or affinity takes care of, there's no need to also whitelist it. It's already taken care of in the affinity.
Well, no, it's not necessarily. It's taken care of, but it would also, our whitelists aren't based on affinities. They're based on, it's a contextual way of targeting. So it's not fair to say, well, if we add as an affinity, that's all we should really need to do. You'd also want to add it as in the whitelist and run contextual placements on that affinity, like you said, snowboarding.
And you can just use it as essentially a keyword of sorts in the.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So like
Right,
this.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, so for adding new ad topics, that would really mirror. It could either be the way you do GA or relative CTR based on what kind of ad group it is, correct?
Wait, say that again.
So you know how right here, if you look here, what I've done is I've mapped what do you do with it and what do you want to do with it,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm gonna move this one over here. Right,
Yeah.
so, oops, damn it. Well, I'll do that later. So, for GA, you add them through topics or affinities, right, in the ad group.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to, in the future, be able to then add them as metadata for the blacklist and whitelist, right?
Mm-hmm.
For your metadata analysis, right, your CTR for keywords, you basically add and remove from the whitelist. You don't do anything with the blacklist for metadata, right? So when you get new topics from the AMs, which is it a wholly different process, or is this enough of a process?
We don't generally, the AMs generally won't just provide new topics unless, prompted by, something happening with the campaign.
Okay, so when Lauren asked it to be included, you don't think there should be a use case for it because you would just add it to the ad group. You don't optimize off of it.
Wait, when she said what? Say that again?
Sorry, what I said was, Lauren, in our last conversation, I had asked, do the AMs also give you new topics for ad groups? And she was like, yes, they do. And I was like, great. And I actually put it in here as one way in which you would optimize. Are you saying that that's not really the case? Like there's no, when you get new ad groups, or topics, do you just add the topics and that's it? And you run it through this process of performance?
Yeah, they do. I mean, they give us pre-launch. Yeah, pre-launch. It depends. So the timing of when they do that, it usually will be pre-launch. If it's post-launch, they're not normally, because they've done their research, right? Unless there's some trigger to make them say, oh, well, either the campaign's performing really poorly or we're not delivering enough impressions because the inventory is too restrictive. They don't usually hit the drawing board again unless there's some trigger for them to do so.
What would be a trigger?
Well, the two things I just said, either the campaign's not delivering enough, the inventory is not broad enough, or the performance is really bad and we can't seem to do anything with the initial targeting. And then they'll go back to the drawing board and think about some new ideas to expand.
Got it. And you would just add them as new ad groups, or how do those changes get processed?
They would most likely be topics under existing ad groups.
Okay, so, and then you would optimize them based on performance in this first workflow, right? Which is, okay, so I can remove it because it's not a new process per se. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with remarketing terms? When do you add them?
Yeah, so remarketing terms is another one of those great analyses that it's just so time consuming that it's done usually at the end of the campaign, but ideally we want to have it done probably as soon as like 3 days post launch, and then again every couple of weeks. So right now it's post, so it's like post campaign. What we'll do is we'll look at all of the metadata, remarketing metadata, and we'll say, oh, this particular term is showing up in a lot of the content that your ad viewers are watching. After they view your ad, they're going elsewhere and they're watching this stuff. You may not have thought about that. It just gives us new ideas for next time. Ideally, what we'd be doing is where we're seeing new metadata appear relatively frequently, and it's not something that we had thought about, we should be in flight adding two existing ad groups. So either like a new affinity we didn't think about, or querying the data warehouse for metadata and adding in new placements to existing, like the whitelist ad groups. It should go on while the campaign is running, but it should at least go on at least once at the end of the campaign.
Okay, so my understanding is that these remarketing terms are actually within AdWords, right?
No.
Where do we find these remarketing terms? Is it through GA?
Yeah, no. So what we need to do to find the remarketing terms is we go to the ad group remarketing, and we go to.
Do you want to show us? Could I trouble you to actually show us on your?
Sure.
Here, I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. All right. So can you see that?
Yep. Dave, you can see it?
Yes, can.
Okay. All right. So I would go. So go to this one, go to video targeting. Make sure I only have remarketing, the remarketing ad group selected. Then I go to placements. Manage placements. Nothing will show up in managed placements because no part of remarketing is managed. It's not a whitelist. It's just it's a different ad. But if I go to where ads were shown, it will show me a list of all of the placements where viewers are seeing our ad. So again, viewer A, he or she views our ad. We're following that person. Google's following that person. They go to some other video on YouTube, and then by virtue of the fact that they saw our video prior, they get served the ad again. So what we're interested in is where they go after they watch our ad the first time and where we get them that second time, like where they are on YouTube, essentially. So if I download this from AdWords, I'll get a whole collection of video IDs, which then I concatenate, which then I have to feed through the data warehouse. So I pull all the metadata. Again, it won't, when I download, it won't download like this. It won't download the actual placement names. It just downloads the metadata. I mean, it just downloads the video ID. And then once I have that, then I go back into a word cloud app, paste everything in, and count the number of hits, or the number of hits on each term, right? And that's where I see, like, so for example, let's say we just didn't we didn't know anything, we didn't think about learn or learning. Like, oh, learn seems to show up a lot, and we didn't really think about learning for this campaign, but it seems to appear a lot in the metadata where our ad viewers are going. So then that would then prompt us, oh, let's add that piece of metadata, and if there's an affinity for it, let's add that. It won't be for, may not be for, I don't think there's for learning, but let's at least create now a new whitelist or add to, you could either be a new, it would probably add to an existing ad group. So let's find learning out there in a data warehouse, and let's add all those placements in, and let's see how they do. And then once they are in as managed placements, then you can do the relative CTR calculation on them, right?
So how do you add them in as managed placements?
So we would then scan, we would scan the data warehouse for, we create a table and just put,
Oh, right. That's
right.
Yeah.
Pull all the URLs where there's a hit, then go to contextual whitelist. Let's say we put it under toys and unboxing, go to placements and add them, plus right here, add them as managed placements.
Yeah.
Managed placements, we can get all the accurate impressions, views, clicks, and we can start analyzing. Then after a few days, we can say, okay, now let's do it again. Let's analyze, let's do relative CTR, and let's see how Learn is. Let's see how Learn is performing. And then, great, it's doing better than benchmark. Was a great find, or if it's doing worse, then it's, oh, let's take it out. Let's take out those placements that had learning in them.
Okay, and so for managed placements, I guess the question is, anything in your whitelist is a managed placement. Is that correct?
Yes, it has to. So the whitelist is a collection of advertiser appropriate placements, which placement can either be a video or a channel, but unless we say channel, we always mean video. And it's added in as by using this, plus placements and pasted in all the URLs.
Right.
And then uploaded. So yeah, it can, and AdWords can take, I think, like 5,000 at a time.
Yeah.
And I think there's a limit of 20,000 for one ad group. So if we ever got beyond 20,000, we would have to add a second ad group.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful to know. Okay. So got it. And the question, I guess, would be on an API level, what does that look like? But we can worry about that later. Managed placement equals whitelist. And then you said the limit is 10,000 right now.
20,000 per ad group.
20,000 per ad group. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Dave, do you have any questions? And is that it? So we have optimized by CTR, optimized keyword CTR, optimized by GA. You have optimized by remarketing, which is essentially you take those videos and you put them into a whitelist, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, no, I think it all makes sense from my point of view. I think it's going to be kind of starting to further refine some of the, like, translating it into actually like an algorithm that might be where things get a little interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like it's a process where it would be like a lot of testing. It would be testing and seeing what the results are, and then being like, we did this 300 times or 3,000 times, and it just depends on the data, Is there any other way? So the only thing that we haven't covered here, I think, is the cross affinity, which we'd love for you to take us through. But is there any other way in which you're thinking about things? You have GA, keyword CTR, and AdWords remarketing.
I mean, that's the big.
I mean, that's a lot, and that's awesome, but.
Yeah, I think that's most of it for as far as YouTube goes.
So why don't you talk to us about how you would accomplish cross-affinity targeting?
Okay, so cross-affinity targeting would work like this. Let's say you find a particular audience on Facebook that is, performing very well, and you're serving ads to this audience. You would then be essentially sending this audience to a certain landing page. And that landing page would then analyze that landing page in GA to get a sense of what that audience looks like in Google. So whatever the Facebook parameters are, that is going to correspond to different parameters or segments in YouTube. So it'll tell you, so this high performing audience we have on one platform, this is what they look like on GA. They happen to have an affinity for pets and cooking, and this is, you know, their age group, and this is, you know, their gender profile and all of those things. And from that, you can take an audience that you built on one platform that you know is performing very, very well, and recreate essentially that audience using Google Analytics. It works best for AdWords, obviously, but you could also, you know, from your learnings from GA, you can apply these improved targeting segments on other platforms as well. It could easily work the other way as well. You can find an audience that's doing well on, you know, your display, AdWords, you know, display or YouTube, send them to a certain landing page, have a Facebook pixel on that page, then Facebook will collect information on them that is categorized by, you know, the way Facebook does it. So they'll have different things and that they'll pull out that you will then be able to use to target on Facebook. So for example, there may not be, like, you know, there's pet lovers on YouTube, and maybe called something slightly different, maybe something different on Facebook. But it will tell you about that audience in the language that that platform understands. And ideally, other ad platforms will have the same ability, although Facebook is really the king when it comes to this. I mean, maybe Pinterest would have, you know, some ability as well to construct audience characteristics that you would then be able to use to target ads on Pinterest. Twitter would presumably have that. But then once you get beyond that, those are really the biggies. Snapchat doesn't collect a lot, so potentially down the road we could use Snapchat as well, but it's, you know, I don't think they collect as much right now, and their targeting options aren't really that robust anyway. So Snapchat's kind of on the back burner in all this, but really it's just a way to get platforms to. It's a way to sort of break down the walled gardens when there's no direct way that they're ever going to share that information between themselves. It's just like a fix to get that information in a way that you know, no one else is really doing, or very few people are doing or thinking about.
I think I'm a little bit lost. So, okay, you have your targeting on Facebook, and on the web page, the landing page or home page or whatever is the Facebook tracking pixel.
Yes.
How does that relate to YouTube? Are you saying the YouTube tracking pixel is also there?
No, the GA tag. Almost everyone has their sites tagged with GA now. So the site is tagged if you built your audience on Facebook, and however you've done that, and however you've optimized your audience, whether it be, you know, you just experimented with their ad categories, or you've got their pixel and you've created a lookalike audience, or however you've done it, you found your audience on Facebook, and they have very good first-party data. It's like, okay, so I know if I was going to start a new campaign on Facebook, I would know exactly the characteristics of my audience. I would know what segments to use, but I don't know if I wanted to target an audience like this on, let's say, YouTube. I don't really know what segments to use because the segments aren't the same. But if I'm sending the audience to a certain landing page, and that landing page is tagged as the GA tag, then GA will start to collect information for me in the language essentially that Google speaks, that even YouTube speaks, right? And you can do one of two things. You can either you can let YouTube then create its own version of the lookalike audience, which is it's called similar to, or you can just go into GA, find the affinities, find the in-market interests, and all the other sort of demo slices, and create your ads to target an audience with the same characteristics as the Facebook audience. Because you're not, it's a specific landing page. The only site visits to this page will be basically the ones that come from Facebook. It's not just the general homepage. It's like, it's either a unique landing page or it's tagged with UTM parameters where you're able to distinguish the characteristics of the audience that comes from a certain source. And that source in this case is Facebook. And you're able to learn, if you wanted to target an audience with the same characteristics, how to do that, because GA is basically giving you that. Is that a little more clear?
So you're saying that there's a landing page that has both Facebook and GA tags, and the two ways to see what the cross-platform affinity is to, one, look at the same view-through window, right? January to February, this is what's registering on Facebook Pixel, and therefore back to the Facebook Analytics tool, and this is what's registering in the GA tool, and that's how you would get, that's one way you would see how the audiences or affinities overlap. The second way was something about similar to tab, which I didn't understand. Is there something in particular you're thinking of, or is it like the GA homepage you're looking at?
No, it's when what YouTube, so both Facebook and YouTube allow you to create audiences from
I see.
data. So Facebook calls
Okay.
it lookalike, and
Yeah, sure.
YouTube calls it similar to, right?
Okay.
So they take a sample, like 10,000 hits on your site, and from that, YouTube knows, or AdWords, Google, they know the characteristics, and they're able to put together a much larger list based on those characteristics. So I've got 10,000, and Facebook works the same way. I've got 10,000 hits, and I know that these 10,000 hits have these characteristics. Let's look at the larger population of Google users or Facebook users, and let's then find additional users that share these characteristics, and let's put them into a list. So it's almost like a remarketing list, but it's not. It's kind of the same thing, because it's a list of users.
Okay.
And then you can go out and target this list of users. So you've created on YouTube a list of users that share characteristics with a very high-performing Facebook audience. It won't be all the same users, but the characteristics will be the same.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any questions, Dave?
Sorry, was on mute there. No, I don't think so.
Okay. So I think I get it. I think the only three open things. The first one is, how do you optimize on Facebook? The second thing is, do you want to take us through the keyword CTR videos? That's just an open question. And then the third thing is, what passwords do we need, Dave, to get from Brent to do any sort of follow-up as I finish mapping these out?
But the third thing was what about Dave?
Getting passwords from you, like on ad ops, and do we need it?
Just email me a list, and I'll create those like as soon as I get them.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's point 3. So the videos, I'd rather you guys just, if you watch them, if it's easier for you to watch them with me and then just have me there to immediately ask like questions, I'm happy to do that. You could also watch them on your own and just jot down the questions and then ask me. Whatever works best for you. We could do it right now if you'd like.
Dave, do you want to watch the videos? Because I know by Friday we were aiming to have a product list, but we'd have to have time to make sure we've covered it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's your call. Whatever you think's best. I'm fine with processing and jotting down notes.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, even if we do the product list, we want product feature list by Friday, we can think of it as a draft and then just meet again the following week on Tuesday or Wednesday to approve them and prioritize them. So we don't have to get everything done by Friday. It's just, so that's fine. So then I guess the last thing we really need to do is look at how you optimize on Facebook. Do you want to open up a Facebook and...
Well, Facebook, it's essentially, it's a lot like YouTube in the sense that we optimize based on view rate, on CTR, and also on engagement. The engagements, they're not obviously YouTube channel engagements. They're things like likes and comments and shares. So the process is very, very similar. It's just that the platform is a little different. But the outline of doing it is similar. The only thing that we can't do on Facebook is get anything around really contextuality, because it's mostly either right column or in feed at the ad unit. They, I guess, are doing some pre-roll now, but even when it's like, even when we advertise on pre-roll, they don't give us like a list of the placements. So there's no tools yet, as far as I know, to either restrict to, certain video types or get any idea of how our ads perform, based on different categories of videos. So it's still, this pre-roll is still very new on Facebook, and we can get statistics on, well, how did the right column ad units do? How did the in-feed ad units do? How did the pre-roll ad units do? But they don't have a ton of information yet. So there's no contextual target on Facebook, no white lists, no black lists. That goes, it's just really based on user behaviors and interests.
Yeah, it's basically segment based, right?
Say again?
And you just...
No, I was saying it's basically it's like segment based. You just basically set the things that you think your audience, or that you want to target, the things they care about, and then it just sort of magically goes off into the ether and does its thing.
Yeah, and so it's set up the same. Instead of what, ad groups, they call them ad sets. And then each individual, you can add different videos, or if it's an image, whatever. Those are called the ads. But the ad set is essentially like the ad group. So the same process of adjusting bids, you do it the same way on Facebook. We do, when we compare cross-platform, we do want to make sure that we are, standardizing for things like view length. So we'd want to calculate, if we're talking to a client, well, what was our cost per 30-second view on YouTube, and what was our cost per 30-second view on Facebook? It's usually much, much higher on Facebook. But stuff like that puts the metric on an equal footing is an additional thing you need when you're doing cross-platform. But within Facebook, the process is very, very similar to YouTube, in the sense that we're working with ad groups. We generally will need more ad groups on Facebook, because Facebook, unfortunately does not report on individual topics. So let's say on YouTube there was an interest, we had an interest ad group and there were 3 interests that we loaded up in that ad group. If we did the same thing on Facebook, it would not report for us the metrics by topic under that ad set. So if you want to track 3 distinct user interests, you have to set them up in their own ad set. So for that reason, I hope that Facebook is going to change that at some point. It's a lot more work because you have to set up a lot more ad sets in Facebook. But the process is essentially, you know, the same. You just reduce bids when they're underperforming. You know, eventually turn them off if they're performing really, really poorly. Okay, so.
But do you ever add like, how do you get ideas to add ad sets?
It's much harder. Really, the only thing you could do, because you're not going to get any contextual, you could rely, I mean, you could use GA, right? The same way you use GA to get ideas for YouTube, you could get ideas for Facebook. There won't be there's not a precise overlap. The Facebook segment is going to be called something different than, you know, the at YouTube affinity segment, but it'll be similar. So in that way, you can still and should definitely be utilizing GA in flight to optimize, to potentially add new things to Facebook. But generally, it works. It works, you know, somewhat similar. You know, with the.
And do you have to execute a chi-square test as well with these, or no?
Say again?
You execute a chi-square test to view when
yes, yes, you still need to do that. You still need to do that to ensure that you have sufficient impressions to make a conclusion about performance.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay. Cool. That was awesome. I think I need to definitely figure out a different way to lay it all out here. And then Dave and I can work tomorrow on how we would optimize your optimization process as soon as I clean this up. Okay, that's that. I did want to talk very quickly on analytics. We don't want to go super deep because I know Loren has a point of view on it, but Dave was awesome enough to do a cursory review of some of the analytics tools. And I just wanted to, you and Loren, Brent, expressed like BIME is cool, but it's kind of hard for you to use because the data transformation requires some coding.
Mm-hmm.
But when we looked at it purely as flexibility, and if you had a developer to make certain reports, it's actually quite flexible. So the question that came up for us is it important for this to be easy for an analyst to use, meaning it really is like a BI tool that can quickly visualize information? Or do you want the flexibility of custom reports that, you know, we create for you, we develop for you, and then you just have to work through a developer to add more? It's up to you. We just wanted to know where the...
Well, if it's more, yeah, I mean, if it saves us time in the long run to have custom reports, as long as we're able to sort of work with them and troubleshoot them if anything goes wrong with them on our own, I think that's a good idea. Any insights as to how we can use BIME more efficiently would be appreciated.
Well, I think it's like that's the question, right? Eventually, if you had a development team, you would be like, great, I want to create this special kind of report, or, you know, and and they could probably do it. They could do it for you and treat it more like a library, or they could create some easy data transformation scripts. Maybe I don't know.
I think it would depend on.
Yeah,
I think it would depend on. I mean, there's a few things to consider. I think using a BI tool makes sense if you're going to be doing a lot of ad hoc reporting. Where you're going to want to see different things, and it'll sort of vary depending on the system. For the actual more plug and play automated stuff, yeah, you probably would want to make some custom reports, but we would look at using a reporting engine that exists that takes care of all of the sort of work for you, and we would just consume it sort of like an API. I think probably would be the easiest or the smartest way of doing it.
So the question is more of a requirements discussion on your part, right? Like we're thinking we're just thinking like, okay, currently we could probably automate the output of some of these Excel reports, and your AMs can, keep doing it and just making it into something beautiful. Or we can find something that is a BI tool where once you've gone through the data and improved it, then your AMs can manipulate the BI tool and get the report the graph or chart that they want, right? Or, eventually you want it to be like, you push a button and this is the chart that comes out.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, eventually that's the full product right there. In the interim, the Excel templates I'm not so worried about. It's more of, and even like the dashboard creation now, we have someone doing that, and he usually finishes up all the dashboards relatively quickly by doing the manual import. So for me, the thing that I'd really like to see automated is the stuff that I need to do optimizations. Before we have a fully automated way of optimizing and changing campaigns and what's coming a year or two down the road, like saving me time, automating that instead of me having to download everything from Excel is probably where I'd like to invest, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll be important when we do feature prioritization. I would simply say that when you guys are creating a client dashboard, like a client interface where they can use it as a planning tool, I think you're going to have sort of standard report view for them, where they don't get anything special. Like it's not like, oh, you get it by DMA or by ad set groups, right? But they're going to need something that a week into the campaign, part of their self-service is they want to see the performance results, right? I don't think you're going to be able to get away with not having at least one report for them to see how they're doing, right, through the campaign.
Well, but we have that. I mean, we're using BIME now to do that already.
Yeah.
Right.
Becky dropped, but yeah, no, I figured you guys were doing that because I know BIME is one of the nicer ones that allows you to cross both like SQL stuff and AdWords data directly. So I think I figured that was sort of the approach was you guys, when you had a campaign, you would just set up a dashboard in BIME against the main campaign IDs and then go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, we're already doing that. I poked around. The last time I really spent a lot of time with BIME was probably a year ago, and I tried to automate everything with their AdWords API. And again, we were able to do like a authorization and connect our AdWords account, but it didn't have all the data and all the slices we needed. So I was able to automate maybe 75% of what I needed to have a fully automated dashboard. Yeah. And, we just decided that, no, we're going to keep doing it manually because we don't give the clients everything that we want to give them when it's automated. Yep. So it's a weird API. It's like the ad, I don't really know how they chose to only include or why they only include certain things that seem to be available in the AdWords API. But they do, and I went back and forth for a while with them, trying to get them to include more, but I basically ultimately just gave up.
Some of that stuff, sometimes they do just the basics, because they go for like breadth of like just getting as many servers as possible and not like getting super deep about things.
Yeah.
I admittedly haven't used BIME too terribly much. I've always used Tableau, which is like the opposite of BIME, where it's like everything is crazy advanced. And it's a real pain in the butt to use, but it's very advanced.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, have you taken a look at the AdWords API for Tableau?
Uh-huh.
Hi guys. Sorry I lost you.
No
Hi.
worries.
I was just stating, since Brent still wants to be able to manipulate the data because of the custom reports, this has to be a BI tool.
Yes, of course.
Or just, the way yeah. I mean, the way we're doing it now is fine for now, and we're providing custom dashboards for our clients already. They're just being populated with information that's being manually downloaded. And when we get to the product and we have an integrated dashboard on the web app itself, then maybe the very, very first stage of that is like a BI tool that's put into an iframe or something. I don't know, but eventually it needs to be integrated. It needs to be something that a reporting interface that we build, and not a BI tool. So it's not.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Dave.
No, I was just saying. I think what we would do is we'd look at like one of the self-hosted ones, like Nautilus, which is the one that Netflix built, where you can use it for all of its ingestion pipeline stuff, and like you can use a BI tool in the backend for like you to create custom reports. But then on the platform side, we can consume that service that's living on your server sort of headlessly and sort of create custom reports or like automated reports that look like that they match inside the look and feel of the platform.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
Yeah. I would imagine we'd have like a template, and we would also have some ability for the clients to query and put together custom elements or modules to the template. Sure.
Well, I guess in the MVP though, I mean, I want to emphasize that we can't just have a BI tool, right? Like, or the question is, can we automate what Brent is doing, right? Can we specify? I just feel like it's too still. Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
I still think like the fact that
Yep.
you're touching the reports is still too high touch, to be honest. And I can't speak with any sense of authority, obviously, but is there a way to automate it and or we're looking for software? Because I think you're going to have, at least for the client interface in phase one, even if what you're doing is an order taking tool, you still have to give them an interface where they can see how they're performing. That's not a custom report. That's just like, here's your report, or here's your dashboard.
I think you're right. I think so we could build something, I imagine, into the MVP where it's not like it's not a BI tool, and it's also not a fancy like, charts and graphs and every imaginable piece of data, but rather it's just sort of a standard, a basic sort of reporting interface where it's pulling things, just even in table format. And maybe there's no ability to customize, but they're getting all the data that they would be getting on the weekly templates, the Excel templates. They could get them right on the web app. They'll still want the Excel templates, but maybe what we can have them do is just download from the web app, and the template will be created in Excel, and we won't have to create it then every week. Is that kind of what you were thinking?
Yeah. before answering completely, I think yes, that sounds the right track. And Dave, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I have some specific thoughts on implementation of just like we should use existing software,
Okay.
like open source software, to do a lot of the like data manipulation stuff for us.
Okay.
Just two reasons. One is it just is quicker, and two, it gives us more scalability later down the line.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with that.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm gonna spend some time tonight reviewing the video, Brent, that you gave me, and then Dave, if you can just stay on the call a little longer, I'll call you separately to talk through what passwords we need, if we even need any.
Okay. Sorry, I keep going on mute because I'm like stuffing my face full of food because I haven't eaten today. So sorry about that.
Brent, do you have any other questions or feedback for us?
Not at the moment. I talked to Dave about a couple things before you joined the call. So I think he's going to give me answers on those. So I think we're fine.
Okay, great. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, so we just talked about the thing that you and I talked about, Becky, about the extra tool, which I think you're going to send out a quote later today on what that is.
Yeah. And then I think we just, yeah, sounds good. All right, great, everyone. Talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you, Becky.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.